Leila Santiago there, joining us now from Los Angeles, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson. I remember you.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too, mate. Okay, at this early stage, money talks. And, Donald Trump, he looks like he's doing particularly well. But, combined, Democrats this cycle have raised almost $90 million in this last quarter. The best comparison is the 2008 primary. It was a crowded field back then. A lot of candidates running. Same time in the election cycle combined, they'd raised just over $85 million. Adjust inflation and all that, and it's pretty much a wash. So, apples for apples. The problem is this election, right now, political purity comes from small dollar donors. And that's where Trump and Sanders are masters at it. So where does that leave the rest of the Democratic field? If they can't get the same sort of, small dollar donors to pony up, are they going to be out of luck?
Well, look, I think more broadly, there's two schools of thought. Number one is that, money doesn't matter, right? Donald Trump theoretically could have won the Republican nomination just by earned media, right? Yeah. And by the way, at this point in the cycle, Jeb Bush was the money frontrunner, and Hillary Clinton was a frontrunner in 2008. None of those folks won, right? The other school of thought, potentially, is that money is cyclical. Those who are raising lots of resources are going to fuel more news coverage because they are perceived frontrunners or the top tier of those running in the race. And those, the extra news coverage and getting their brand and their message out there is going to then propel them in polls, which then, like a cycle, helps them to raise more money. So it sort of creates this merry-go-round effect.
Where do you stand? What do you think?
Well, look, I think it's the merry-go-round effect. I mean, look, the reality is we're going to talk right now about Bernie Sanders. Why? Because he raised the most amount of money. And you'd mentioned small dollar donors. I think that's significant. Why? Because he can sustain over the long haul. If you look at the individual contributions that Bernie Sanders received from individuals, 84% of those were less than $200. That means that he can hit up those donors again and again and again and sustain a months-long, years-long even, campaign all the way potentially to the convention. And that's critical. These low-dollar donations are very, very important because what we saw last cycle with the binary choice of Bernie Sanders, the low-dollar funded campaign versus Hillary Clinton, is she was hitting up a lot of the heavyweight donor class who can only max out at $2,700 a pop. Once they give, they're done. Now, they can raise money from their friends and family and neighbors, but once they hit that high threshold, the contribution limit, they're done. Okay, Bernie Sanders can hit these folks up repeatedly.
So in this calculation so far, no mention of Joe Biden, the former vice president. If he decides to run, then obviously everything changes. The president has made this prediction. He tweeted, "I believe it'll be crazy Bernie Sanders versus sleepy Joe Biden as the two finalists run against maybe the best economy in the history of our country, really." And many other great things. I look forward to facing whoever it may be. May God rest their soul. Okay, earlier this month, there was a film crew spotted outside Biden's childhood home in Scranton. Politico reports word is leaked about Biden taping a Spanish language ad in Florida. So, declare already, get in. But just like generals fighting the last war, is Biden the right candidate for the last election?
Well, if you look at the early polls, and again, they're very early, but even Fox News put out a poll, John, just on Sunday, showing Biden beating Donald Trump 47-40. And in fact, the Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders was even beating Donald Trump 44-41 in that same poll. So I think it's clear that Donald Trump the American people have soured on Donald Trump. He's become toxic. Americans are sick and tired of the crisis to crisis mentality of the White House. And so I think they're looking for change. And it's undoubtedly going to be a referendum in this election against the commander-in-chief, Donald Trump. And that's why I think you're seeing these Democrats consistently polling ahead of the incumbent president.
If you want to talk about change, there's probably no candidate who would be a bigger change from Donald Trump than Mayor Pete, Peter Buttigieg, okay? Back in January, the first major story the New York Times ran about him, they included a handy little pronouncer for his last name. He was that much of an unknown. He pronounces it Buttigieg. And he's among one of the frontrunners now. He's raised $7 million. Not a lot in itself, but it's a significant chunk of cash for someone who is from South Bend, Indiana. No one knew up until a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, the reality is, I think anything can happen, right? Conventional wisdom has been thrown out the window. Donald Trump is president. Nobody thought that would happen. And by the way, nobody thought Barack Obama in 2007 was going to ultimately become president of the United States. And so I think, it's plausible. This guy clearly has been proven to be a prolific fundraiser. $7 million in such a short time span as a local mayor is nothing short of jaw-dropping. And it's clear that he's the flavor of the week. The question Is he going to be the flavor of the month? Is he going to be the flavor of the quarter? And perhaps more than that. That's the big unknown, right? And I think also when we get into these debates and we talk about specifics, the question is he going to have sort of a breakthrough moment to stand out and sustain this momentum? That's the big unknown.
Yeah, if he was elected as president, he would have more military experience than any other president since George H.W. Bush.
I think it's amazing. I mean, look, I think that is a key asset. I mean, ultimately, it's those independent swing voters in those purple states and those states that recently flipped red to blue, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And, his ability to talk about being a veteran and fighting for our country and being a patriot, I think that is a key asset that he ought to use in his campaign, capitalize on it, and I think he will.
Okay, one last thing on Mayor Pete. Donald Trump wants to label all socialists, all Democrats as socialists, because of the Green New Deal and Medicare for all. Buttigieg, it seems to be able to take on that argument and turn it back onto Trump and the Republicans in a very calm and measured way. Here he is. Listen to this.
Well, I think the reason we're having this argument over socialism and capitalism is that capitalism has let a lot of people down. I guess what I'm out there to say is that it doesn't have to be so. I believe in democratic capitalism, but the Democratic Party is extremely important. Having that framework of a rule of law, of fairness, is actually what it takes for markets to work.
He's done this on a number of issues, like family values and Christian values. And, he's taken this and directly challenged Vice President Mike Pence on a number of these issues. And right now he seems to be the only Democrat able to do that.
I think that's right. I mean, he's got a very optimistic and uplifting message, which I think the country needs right now. There's too much division and chaos and extremism. And I think the reality is that coming from the Midwest, he's able to talk about these issues and present a different tone than perhaps we've seen over the course of Donald Trump's presidency. I think the devil's going to be in the details. When it comes out to the specifics, he rolls out sort of his blueprint. That's going to be the real barometer about whether or not this message is able to resonate. But on the flip side, I'll tell you, John, Bernie Sanders was on Fox News the other day and got a standing ovation when he talked about Medicare for all. And by the way, this is an issue consistently that polls where the majority of Americans actually support the issue, including Republicans. And so I think that's going to be a key issue that continues to sort of have broad appeal and be part of this discourse as we move ahead.
Yeah, out of time. But Democrats swept the House in 2018, not on the Russia report or Mueller or Trump's whatever taxes. They won it on health care. So, it's an important indicator for what's coming up next year.
Absolutely.
But Dave, as always, it's really good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Okay, when we come back, it stood for more than 8 centuries with gargoyles.